What is hell? At the beginning of the 14th century, the father of the Italian language, Dante Alighieri, writes his greatest work, the Divine Comedy. Dante imagines himself falling into a murky, violent afterlife, the Inferno.
It's strange to think that a piece of poetry written in the 14th century could still be relevant, and yet it is. It's still incredibly powerful.
No matter who's been writing about hell, always have in mind Dante's book, because he was the first to give a flesh to hell.
For the first time, a literary work described sins in all their real and carnal nature, laying bare the horrific punishments of those souls that had been damned.
Dante descrive i peccati. I peccati sono atti e qui ogni atto ha una sua sceneggiatura.
A cruel, apocalyptic world that fired up the imagination of some of the world's greatest artists. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark. For the straightforward pathway had been lost. When we die, what happens to us? What is sin? These are the questions Dante, a man like any other, asks on reawakening in the world of the dead. A dark wood. But why does Dante find himself in this place? The gate to hell awaits him. His journey is just beginning. More than 700 years later, Dante's journey remains incredibly modern. The surprising and visionary diary of an ordinary man who sees himself for what he is and faces up to what sin really means.
Dante's infernal journey is, of course, preordained, so he has to undertake it in order to save himself. But in order to do that, he has to witness the varieties of sin and the damage that sin can do, and explore the world of sin in order to get beyond it and get out of it.
Hell is mentioned many times in the Bible, but it's never really described in any detail. Dante was the first to imagine hell as a physical place in the formidable 34 cantos that go to make up a poem. Every canto features extraordinary encounters with people who really existed and creatures from Greek myths which have forever redefined our idea of hell.
Before Dante, artists depicted hell as an abstract place, maybe with one huge mouth where you entered into it. After Dante, hell becomes incredibly specific. There are recognizable people, there are demons, torture is being carried out. All of those details, the sense of an actual landscape of hell, is all depicted by Dante and brought to life by artists for hundreds of years.
Luca Signorelli. William Blake, Sandro Botticelli, Gustave Doré. The Inferno gets under the skin and enters the heart of many great artists right from its opening page. Like in a dream, Dante finds himself in a dark wood, symbol of all worldly sins. While seeking a way out, he comes across the three beasts. The three dark animals of the night, lust, pride, and avarice, surround him, and Dante became increasingly confused and desperate.
When the poem opens, Dante plunges us straight into the action. It's a terrifying vision of a man lost, of a man searching for himself. He's lost in the woods. Now, three beasts appear early on, and they're incredibly symbolic. The lion, the leopard, and the she-wolf. Now, they represent lust, pride, and avarice, the three great sins. No one depicts the three wild beasts of Dante better than Joseph Anton Koch in the Casino Massimo just outside Rome. It's painted so beautifully. He lavishes so much attention to those figures and to that scene that it's like a real event, that it really happened. It's a very graceful painting by an artist who was very consumed not only with his own faith, but with making art different.
Dante is on the verge of giving in to sin. But from out of the darkness emerges the celebrated poet, Virgil, a symbol of wisdom, and he drives the beasts away.
Dante's a poet. He loves the poetry of Virgil. He had great precedence in Virgil's description of the underworld in the 6th book of the Aeneid, which is the great subtext lying underneath the whole of the Inferno. And so that's why it's a poet who guides him. So I think Virgil is both the poetic guide, his maestro, but he also represents the best that human intelligence and knowledge and art can achieve.
Dante and Virgil, pupil and master, each seem to be a reflection of the other. In the poem, Dante is confused and has lost his way. Virgil represents the rational side of human beings, the part that is essential if sin is to be spurned. With Virgil's help, Dante emerges from the dark wood and eventually ends up at the entrance to hell. Hell, whence no man returns. Dante is forced to go through the gate of hell and come to grips with the unavoidable journey to the summit of eternal damnation. From this time on, he won't be allowed to turn back. Through me, the way is to the city dolent. Through me, the way is to eternal dole. All hope abandon, ye who enter in. Having passed through the gate, Dante is submerged in a place that is dark, cold and starless.
The gate, symbolically in psychoanalysis, to pass a gate is to pass something, is to change. When you enter, you know that you're crossing a line, and there's something that says, who you passes that door, forget any hope.
In The Gates of Hell, one of the greatest 19th century sculptors, Auguste Rodin, created a kind of summary of Dante's entire works. Beneath the watchful eye of the thinker, often thought to be Dante himself, the bodies of the damned emerge. Deformed, yelling, and heading for the void as they try to escape from their bronze cage. No fewer than 180 figures go to make up this composition, among whom we can recognize the sorrowful Count Ugolino and the eternal lovers, Paolo and Francesca. In the hands of Rodin, the immobility of material becomes dramatic narrative movement.
All those images, I think this ouverture, like in music, in classic music, this ouverture is grandiose. You have the music, you have the chorus, you have all those people around.
The Gates of Hell is Auguste Rodin's last will and testament. He dedicated the last 30 years of his life to the composition, a superb masterpiece destined to remain unfinished. Rodin's journey may have been interrupted by his death, but that of Dante is only just beginning. He will have to go through all the torments of hell to understand sin in all its guises. With the Divine Comedy, at the beginning of the 14th century, Dante was the first man to imagine the world beyond as a place with a precise physical structure. The Inferno is a huge underground hole divided up into various circles, and the damned are forced to undergo increasingly fierce punishments. Dante bestows upon them eternal sufferings that are directly correlated to the sins they committed during their lifetimes. This is the law of contrapasso.
Contrapasso is a famous system lying behind the punishment of sins, meaning basically appropriate punishment for the sin committed. Suicides, for example, because the suicides do away with their body, they are then imprisoned in trees and bushes because they held the body to be of no worth. So Dante does that for every single sin throughout the Inferno. It's extraordinary range and variety of punishments.
Dante affronta questo viaggio come se fosse un pellegrino. Essendo un uomo, egli stesso è un peccatore, si riconosce nei vari peccati, ha paura perché è ancora in vita e sa che può peccare ancora di più e che quindi gli può succedere dopo morto di entrare in uno di questi settori in cui i dannati soffrono per l'eternità.
Even Sandro Botticelli is affected by the Inferno. At the height of the Renaissance, he abandons the pagan subjects he was renowned for, like the birth of Venus, and creates the first iconic work linked to the poem.
When I think of Dante's Hell, I bring to mind Botticelli's map. Botticelli really understands Dante. He literally draws a map of hell. No one has ever drawn a map of Dante's Hell before. It's almost clinical in a way. It's like a documentary. Botticelli gives weight and authenticity to Dante's extraordinary words. He brings it to life.
Botticelli is the first to imagine hell as an underground funnel, and he is the first artist to be deeply influenced by Dante's work. From that time on, his sacred subjects take on a much darker hue, and this makes him an awkward presence in Florence, a cradle of civilization and beauty, but a hotbed of sin too. 100 years earlier, Dante himself had faced a similar scenario. At the beginning of the 1300s, Dante was a politician and a successful poet. But in reality, he was a broken man. His muse, Beatrice, had died recently at a young age. In the Divine Comedy, Dante elects Beatrice to be his guardian angel. It is she who entrusts Virgil with accompanying her beloved through the perils of hell, while she waits to rejoin him forever.
Beatrice is both a real woman, but also a symbol of Dante's salvation. Just as Virgil's an allegory of reason, Beatrice will be an allegory of theology and salvation.
Deprived of his only love, Dante dedicates all his energy to politics. But in 1302, he is accused of corruption, maybe wrongly, and exiled. It is in the midst of all this confusion that the idea of writing the Inferno, an explosively powerful tale of a journey of initiation, comes to him.
And I think if Dante had remained in Florence, he would never have written in that way at all. So it's a poem that contains the whole world.
L'Inferno è provocatorio, è molto duro, è molto pesante, è anche una vendetta per i torti che Dante ha subito.
Dante was a sinner, was a proud man, and pride is one of the sins.
Woe unto you, ye souls depraved, hope nevermore to look upon the heavens. I come to lead you to the other shore, to the eternal shades in heat and frost. Dante has passed through the gate of hell and reopens his eyes in the dark. He wants to escape but can't. In front of him stands a disturbing figure, the ferryman of dead souls, Charon.
Charon, who's making you cross this river, and you have this guy who's beating up people, and you even have to pay him. It's like paying for a prison.
Dante's Charon has been depicted in many different ways, from the green monster of Michelangelo's The Last Judgment to the harrowing boatfuls of severed heads which African artist James Robert Kokobi uses to create a link between two voyages bereft of hope. Dante's damned souls and the thousands of clandestine immigrants who risk their lives on fleeing war zones. But for most of us, Charon remains a scowling figure depicted by one of the greatest 19th century illustrators, Gustave Doré.
When I think of some of the most famous parts of the Inferno, the images that come to my mind belong to Doré, his extraordinary picture of Charon, this weather-beaten old man. His world is a horrible, depressing, bleak landscape, and Gustave Doré depicts that so poignantly. And he made it very, very modern, very contemporary. The people looking at his illustrations in the 19th century suddenly had a way into Dante.
There is no better accompaniment than Doré's illustrations when following Dante on his journey. Once Charon has been left behind, the poem continues with an extraordinary meeting. Love that exempts no one beloved from loving seized me with pleasure of this man so strongly that, as thou seest, it doth not yet desert me. On reaching the circle of the lecherous, Dante is taken unawares by a storm. It is a tangle of lovers, souls overcome by their passions, as in their earlier lives. Two lovers emerge from the storm, Paolo and Francesca. Love has inducted us unto one death. Caena waiteth him who quenched our life.
Dante Gabriel Rossetti does something very tender, very magical, and very powerful in his painting of Paolo and Francesca. Rossetti is able to isolate this one moment. In it, somehow, he tells us of the entire condition of Inferno. These are two adulterous lovers, but right and wrong is not that simple. They fall madly in love, and they're murdered by Francesca's husband, which is also Paolo's brother. There they are, swaying in this infernal wind, this kind of cataclysmic sense of fire. That sense of the fiery love has now turned into a fiery hell. I don't think there's another artist who puts his heart and soul in the place of Dante more than Gabriel Rossetti.
The encounters that Dante makes during his journey to hell are like those moments that go to create the pathway of an entire life. The further he travels towards the center of the earth, the greater the punishments he witnesses. From the gluttonous who are forced to writhe about in their excrement, to the fiery rain that flagellates those who commit violence against God.
Dante's Inferno is not just a poem about God and religion, but actually it's about human weaknesses and how these are portrayed and to what extent we might forgive them and to what extent we might not.
Dante fears ever more for his life and is forced to continue his journey down the Styx River. He is attacked by the wrathful, damned souls that have been blinded by fury who try to overturn his boat in the water. They smote each other, not alone with hands, but with head, and with the breast and feet tearing each other piecemeal with their teeth. Among the wrathful, Dante recognizes Filippo Argenti, the man who had sentenced him to exile. For the first time in the poem, we see Dante's revengeful nature as he whips up support against Argenti.
Dante non sappiamo se era una persona di specchiata onestà, certamente non era una persona di grande equità. Nella Divina Commedia non si atteggia mai a giudice, però di fatto lo è e lo fa arbitrariamente. E questo naturalmente fa il bello dell'Inferno.
Revenge against Argenti is sweet for Dante. From this time on, he undertakes his journey with a new inner strength that will transform him into the kind of epic hero, beloved of so many romantic painters, like Eugène Delacroix.
Delacroix is a kind of a storyteller that is only interested in big stuff. Dante was one of the epics for him. Delacroix was interested in marking, but not only because of what the meaning, because of the technique, but also because of the grandeur.
Delacroix's breakthrough painting was the bark of Dante. Virgil stands concerned for Dante. He's not that fearful, he's upright, he's alert. And in the water, you see all the bodies of the damned that can't be saved. And there's Dante. We want to be him. We want to have a chance of salvation. There he is on the boat. This is his moment where he has to confront hell in order to get through to go to paradise.
Freeing himself of the wrathful, Dante encounters the fiery walls of a nightmarish city, Dis. The sky turns black, and the city's guardians try to stop him. These are the three Furies. The mythological daughters of blood and remorse. The cruelest of the three, Medusa, tries to turn Dante to stone with her glance, but he manages to escape. Suddenly, Dante is confronted with one of the worst sins of hell, the denial of God. The heretics who are confined within the walls of the city of Dis questioned the dogma of Christian religion during their lives and must now purify themselves among the flames for the rest of time. It was an apocalyptic image that the artist William Blake identified with readily.
William Blake had a very antagonistic relationship with the church his whole life. In fact, he was accused of heresy in his lifetime. When we think of Blake dying during the Inferno, on the last days of his life, you think of a man who's actually tormented. And it's quite poignant to look at the way that he paints hell, particularly how he paints people who have gone to the city of Dante for heresy, because of course he's thinking, everyone thinks that's going to happen to me, and so the way that he paints it is quite revealing. So he's painting the city of Dante potentially because he thinks that's where he's headed.
As the journey proceeds, the sins and punishments become even greater. Suddenly, Dante is enveloped by a sensation of intense cold. The origin of all evil is close by. To know sin and to purify oneself of it is the essential reason behind Dante's journey through hell. And this will now lead him to one of the most disturbing places in the entire poem. I think he thought that I perhaps might think so many voices issued through those trunks from people who concealed themselves from us. Dante is once again in a forest. Only this time it's a very different place from where the story began. It is a disturbing, monstrous maze of strange, dead-looking tree trunks. Dante inadvertently breaks a branch, and a howling noise. As if in a nightmare, the forest comes to life. The trees are alive. This is the forest of suicide. Those who commit suicide abuse the free will that God has granted them, and they are turned into twisted, animated trees for eternity. For the anti-clerical Salvador Dali, the forest of suicides consists of grotesque and forbidding anthropomorphous tree trunks. And thanks to the expressive immediacy of watercolor, Dali is able to express his agonizing search to re-establish contact with God.
Dante's Divine Comedy, and especially the Inferno, has a very universal message, but completely different artists have responded to the text. They go on a personal and spiritual journey. We know that Salvador Dali, an artist who had a really difficult relationship with Christianity and the church his whole life, took the last rites on his deathbed, having made his own sequence of drawings, very personal works about Inferno.
On leaving the forest of suicides, The perturbed Dante is determined to carry on and sets off for the deepest recesses of hell, until he reaches the circle inhabited by those who have committed the worst sin of all. His mouth uplifted from his grim repast, that sinner wiping it upon the hair of the same head that he behind and wasted. Betrayers are punished in the last circle of hell, and it is here that Dante meets Count Ugolino. Ugolino is starving, hungry, and is forced to feed on the skull of Archbishop Alighieri, who in real life had imprisoned him and his family for betrayal. Destined to die of starvation, in his last hours, Ugolino desperately tries to resist the temptation to feed on his own children.
Dante implies that he ends up eating his children, that they're starving to death and the children offer themselves to their father. He leaves the details to our imagination, which is almost worse. Carpeau's extraordinary sculpture brings that moment to life. Usually, an artist has hundreds of drawings. They make an entire illustration of the Divine Comedy. But yet, Carpeau distills Inferno down to this one man and this one story. He's biting his hand, he's starving, but also he's completely tormented. It's this extraordinary 19th century image of the new romantic hero, Ugolino.
An emotional Dante leaves Count Ugolino. By now, he has seen evil in all its forms. His journey will end with the most terrifying meeting of all. A meeting that had already occurred many years ago in Florence.
The devil was present in the daily lives of Christians of Dante's time. You go into the baptistry in Florence, there's a huge depiction of the Last Judgment. I think it's difficult for us to imagine how religious a time that was. There were mystics and there were people who believed in that particular existence of Satan.
As a child, Dante must have seen the staggering mosaics in the baptistry by Coppo di Marcovaldo. Now, they predate the Divine Comedy by about 50 years. And in those mosaics, you see a demon with 3 men, one in his mouth, being eaten forever. It's the most gruesome image. And actually, that may well be where Dante took his inspiration to have a Satan figure who was perpetually eating the damned.
The horrific Inferno of the Florence baptistry, a truly violent vision for the times, inspired the last canto of the poem, the blood-curdling meeting between Dante and the devil. After the long journey, Dante has to come to terms with the greatest of horrors, the supreme evil. He used to be the most beautiful angel in heaven. Now he is an exiled rebel in the darkness, the worst traitor of them all, the Black King of Hell, Lucifer. He rises up, entrapped in ice, in the company of the most ignoble of the damned. Ice, because it is the furthest point away from the warmth of divine love. Tragic parody of God, he screams in anger for eternity. The Emperor of the Kingdom Dolorous, from his mid-breast forth issued from the ice. And better with a giant I compare than do the giants with those arms of his.
Lucifero è stato cacciato dal cielo per avere disubbidito a Dio. E a questo punto Dante lo deve rappresentare come la negazione della divinità. Il demonio deve avere tratti bestiali, tratti ferini, ma non è l'elemento dello spavento su cui Dante punta, è l'elemento della bestialità, cioè la mancanza di intelligenza.
Dante portrays Satan as a kind of grotesque reversal of the Trinity. Satan has three heads, in each of which is devouring a sinner guilty of the sin of betrayal. So Brutus and Cassius, the traitors against Julius Caesar, and Judas, the person who betrayed Christ. But Satan is not in the midst of burning flames, as was traditional, but embedded and emotionless in a sea of ice. So Dante again takes the tradition and does something original with it.
As Dante imagined him, Lucifer had three faces. Many artists have tried to capture his appearance. Like Giotto, whose Satan in the splendid Arena Chapel in Padua was dull and fat. And the powerful Inferno by Giovanni da Modena in the San Petronio Basilica in Bologna, where Beelzebub sits in his throne among some of the most cruel punishments in the history of art. While in the cathedral in Orvieto, Luca Signorelli chooses not to depict Lucifer, but the effects of his influence on demons and the damned. Realistic, grotesque, and very close to the pages of Dante.
For me, me, the depiction of hell doesn't get any more terrifying than Signorelli in the Orvieto Chapel. It's like a horror film. So today, when we think about hell as a specific place, that's all from Dante. And as a consequence, artists have this whole new artistic vocabulary, all these gory details that they can pull out and depict.
During the 20th century, one of the most bloody and violent in history, evil changes shape quickly. Dante's vision is taken up by popular culture. He's cited in rock music, cinema, and conceptual art. In Hell's Half Acre, a London tube tunnel becomes a new Inferno, and in 1996, designer Alexander McQueen had sophisticated demons in lace and latex on the catwalk. Dante has become a mythical presence in our lives.
Dante riesce a cogliere il nucleo dell'uomo, che è la presenza del dubbio, che nel mondo di Dante era piuttosto il dubbio della salvezza, mentre per noi è piuttosto il dubbio di una sopravvivenza dopo la morte.
There is a source of evil in the world. It's a human aspiration to try and pinpoint a source for the evil that surrounds us. So that's absolutely the same today as it was 7, 8 centuries ago.
Sin, obsession, rebirth. After his journey to hell, Dante uses his newly won strength to survive his meeting with the devil. Now is the time for purification. Dante enters a long underground tunnel that will release him from the nightmare.
You can read it, the Divine Comedy, utterly non-religious, and you go on a personal journey. So as an artist, what an extraordinarily tantalizing thing to depict your own personal journey and all of those great gruesome, twisting torture. We all love a horror story, so it's completely tantalizing for artists.
Art is what allows us to go and see what is beyond. Regarding Dante, I could say, well, it's Catholic integrist. I'm not interested in his books. But if you go beyond the concept, you find out that it's a beautiful story. And I think that we need to go beyond ideologies and concept, and this is the place of art.
Dante emerges from the tunnel and sees the stars once more. It is a world of the living that he now sees with different eyes, without the anger and fear that had plagued him at the beginning of his journey. Dante invented hell as we imagine it now, forcing great artists to confront sin and the obsession with death, free at last to express the truest part of their natures.